Hello and thank you for coming to the McWaters Effect. I'm your host Matt. Today we're going to be talking about the Georgia voting law. But before I get started, I need you to hit like and subscribe. Helps the channel grow. Now let's get on with the show. Alright guys, I'm going to come out and say this. I'm a little pissed off that I have to actually do this video because I wasn't planning on doing it because I don't live in Georgia. It doesn't affect me. But every time I hear on the news, all I'm hearing is about Georgia's voting law is Jim Crow on steroids. And I know that's hyperbole, it's not true, so I wanted to take a look at it and see for myself what the law is all about. And also, I wanted to compare it to other laws that are in other states, such as Joe Biden's particular state, since he's the one that actually said that comment. And also wanted to compare it to New York, which is a bigger state than Georgia when it comes to population, and also New Jersey, which New Jersey's population and Georgia's population is pretty close to being the same. They're pretty close when it comes to electoral vote count. I believe New Jersey's 14 and I believe Georgia's 16. So they're pretty close in size. So I wanted to compare their voting practices to Georgia's voting practices. Now, the main two things I looked at when it came to this bill compared to these other states were early voting and the voter ID laws. Now, I also looked at when it comes to absentee ballot. Now, the problem with doing that and their laws in each of these states, they're very obscured and hard to figure out what they're talking about and whether or not it's any different than Georgia's. Because really, I didn't see much of a difference when I looked at them. The only difference I saw from Georgia when it came from before and after is two things. Number one, in Georgia, before it was you were allowed 180 days to get your absentee ballot, to fill it out, sign it, show ID, and turn it in, okay? Now, actually, you didn't have to show ID. And now, you have to do all that and show ID in 77 days. They shrunk it down too far, in my opinion, because when it comes to bureaucracy is a pain in the ass. It slows down everything. It makes it harder for people to get things, especially when it comes to the U.S. Postal Service. Sometimes you get stuff late. That's the only part of the bill that I see a problem with. Now, the next thing that Democrats seem to be upset about was Biden mentioned when he mentioned it was Jim Crow on steroids, he's talking about them not allowing political operatives to give people water, food, or anything else while they're in line. I actually agree with that. They shouldn't be doing that. That's not what a political operative is for, all Republican or Democrat side. But in Georgia, they're not saying no one can do it. They're saying poll workers will be doing that, not the political operatives, which I'm fine with. That actually makes sense because they don't have a political agenda. They're there to help you get your ballot in and get you on your way. They're not there to tell you who to vote for or who not to vote for. Political operatives obviously have an agenda. Another thing they mentioned about the absentee ballot is the ID part. On their website, they're allowing you to use 6 different photo IDs. Now, they actually have, I'll show you when I get to Georgia's election laws, but they actually have a place where you can click and go into the site and actually get a photo ID. You don't even have to leave the house. All you have to do is fill out a form you would normally fill out at DMV or something like that. Fill it out, whatever kind of place you have where you get IDs at in that particular state. Fill out the form. Take a picture of yourself with your phone, computer, laptop, whatever you might have, and send it to them. They'll send you an ID in the mail. It's easy and simple. Well, the Democrats don't talk about that part. All they're talking about is how it's going to make it hard for grandma, service people. Actually, they don't even mention military. I'm sorry. They mention grandma and grandpa, how hard it's going to be for them and how hard it's going to be for poor people and for minorities. Which I'm pretty sure poor people and minorities, they have a cell phone with a damn camera on it. And they can take a picture of themselves and send it to there and get an ID if they don't have one, which most people do. I mean, you need an ID for almost everything anymore. You need an ID to open a bank account, buy a beer, go to strip clubs, all sorts of shit. You got to have an ID for it. Now I'm done with that. I want to get into the early voting. Okay, in Delaware, the home state of Joe Biden, there's no early voting. None. Then you got New York. There's 10 weeks of early voting. Then you got New Jersey, 9 weeks of early voting. Then you have Georgia, It's 15 weeks of early voting now. You got almost 4 months. 4 months to vote ahead of election. I don't see how that's oppressing anybody. So not only does Georgia have more weeks of early voting than the president's home state, which the president's home state of Delaware has none, but it has more voting time, more early voting than New York and New Jersey, which New York has almost twice the population of Georgia. You think they would have more? Now, I've decided to look at each of these states when it comes to voter ID laws. Registered voters do not need to show ID to vote unless they don't provide identification with registration. First-time voters must provide identification either on or with their voter registration application. Okay, voter registration applications in New York, similar to the state I live in, which is West Virginia. They look at your ID whenever you ask for a registration card or to registration form so you can get your registration card to get sent to you. And they've already seen your ID. They know your address, social security number, so on and so forth that you put on there. It's an ID law, but it's just you don't have to take the ID, your photo ID to vote. All you need is a registration card. And that registration card also tells you where you're supposed to vote as well. Okay, the next state I'm looking at is New Jersey. Registering to vote in person or by mail. You must provide your driver's license number, state ID number if you have one. If you do not have either of these IDs, you must provide the last 4 digits of social security number if you have one. If you don't have a social security number, then leave the space blank in your registration form. Okay, if the state can match up your number to official records to you having shown an ID documenting from your vote count. Just in case, if you can, it's a good idea. They have a registration card too, just like West Virginia did. It's no different than New York or West Virginia. You have to show your ID, social security number, so on and so forth to actually get a registration card. All right, guys, I'm on Delaware. Now, if you look down at the bottom, this is your voter registration card. Okay, that means it's just like New Jersey, West Virginia, New York. You have to show photo ID, social security number, so on and so forth. Probably a couple forms of IDs, when it comes to bills for address purposes. So it's no different than those states. Okay, now we're on voter ID for Georgia. Georgia requires voters to present photo ID while voting, accepting forms of ID, including Georgia's driver's license or ID card, U.S. passports, and U.S. military ID. For a list all accepted forms of ID, see below. Voters can obtain free voter ID cards from any county register office or Department of Driver Services office. Click here for more information on obtaining a free voter ID card in Georgia. Now, I clicked on that, and you can actually fill out the form, take a picture of yourself, send it to them, and they will send you an ID back. And I don't see how that's repressing anybody from voting in the state of Georgia, whether they're minorities or old people or anybody else. The other interesting thing is when it comes to the absentee ballots, it does not affect it doesn't affect people that are over 65, as well as people that are in the military. They don't have to show an ID at all. It stays the same for them as it did before they passed this law. So the real big difference between this law and the laws that are there is they're seeing Delaware, New York, and New Jersey are seeing your ID on the back end way before it starts time to vote, and you get a voter registration card. And Georgia, they don't have voter registration cards. They just do an ID when you go to the polling place. Okay, to be honest with you, I see them both as the same. They both have voter ID laws. It's just that there's slight differences between them. Now, I do see one problem when it comes to the voter registrations and the voter IDs, and they're both really big problems, especially for Native Americans. And that's if you live on a Native American reservation, you don't have an address. You have a P.O. box. And a P.O. box you cannot use as an address so you can vote. So you're disenfranchising Native Americans from voting, or Alaskan Natives as well. And I don't hear anybody talking about that. And the reason they're not talking about that, the reason I brought this up, look at the population in the United States. 1.3. That's the population. They don't give a shit. That's why they're not bringing it up. If they gave a crap, they'd bring it up and try to actually fix that in every state. And I'll be honest with you guys, I wasn't the one that actually thought of the whole P.O. box part of the registration thing. I was talking to this guy, and he mentioned it to me because he used to live in South Dakota. And in South Dakota, there's quite a few Indian reservations. Well, most of the Indians there have P.O. boxes, not addresses. So they're not allowed to vote because they don't have an actual physical address. And I see that as a problem because if anyone deserves to vote more than anybody else, it'd be Native Americans, I would think. But that's just my opinion. I understand they're only 1.3% of the population, but you know what? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they're only 2% of the 0.02% of the population. They should be able to vote and not be handicapped from doing so because of rules that are put in there and acted by people that don't care. And now the next thing I'm going to talk about is how the left pretty much pressured the media and corporations to stop doing business in Atlanta over in Georgia altogether over this ID law, especially with Major League Baseball getting the All-Star game out. All you have done hurt workers that work at the stadium. You also hurt hotels that are going to be rooming the players as well as the reporters that are going to be there, the media, so on and so forth. Also, people that are coming out of town to go watch it. You're causing millions of dollars of taxpayer revenue that could have came into Atlanta, Georgia, because you don't like an ID law because it doesn't favor what you want it to be. And really, if you look at it, it's better than any other. It's better than most election laws there are in Democrat states. And I also find it hypocritical that you have companies like Delta, Coca-Cola talking out about it, and Major League Baseball talking about it, and then you got some NBA players talking out about it, as well as the NBA. I find it kind of hypocritical that they do that, and then they praised China when they have concentration camps in their country. They don't condemn that. Hell, they praise China. Not only that, the players wear Nikes that are put together by sweatshops in China. Kids are putting those things together and not getting paid. Where's the outrage in that? And then you have the president going around calling this law Jim Crow era type law when it's a complete lie. All right, guys, this last part of it, I really just wanted to have fun and just mess around, and I couldn't think of anyone else better than Brian Stelter to talk about and make fun of. Because this guy he freaks me out. Just that smile freaks me out, and half the time, half the stuff that's spilling out of his mouth is not true, and he's just a political hack. And when I see him, you know what he reminds me of? Has anyone seen Spawn? He reminds me of this feller here. Holy crap. They could be twins, man. I mean, when that movie came out, I think I was about, I'd say 18, maybe 17 or 18. And that character, which John Leguizamo played, he played him great. But that character freaked me out because I don't like clowns anyway. And that smile and all the freaky stuff he would say, oh my God. And then as soon as I see Brian Stelter, I was like, this dude, that's like the guy from freaking Spawn, man. Oh, makes me hurt. Just makes me hurt. But I decided to do this for some fun, get some people laughing. But it made me laugh. That's all I care about, I guess. Now, guys, I've started something new, and it's my quote of the day. And my quote for today is done by Malcolm X. And instead of reading it, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and just show you a picture with the quote of him and with the quote on it. All right, here's the quote. The Democrats are playing you for a political chump. And if you vote for them, not only are you a chump, you are a traitor to your race. End quote. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you didn't, I don't know what to tell you. But please come back, hit like and subscribe. Helps the channel grow. Peace.